Hello, I'm Dr. Kathy Farah. I'm an integrative and holistic family medicine physician. And tonight I'm here to talk with you and bring on a wonderful panel, and we're going to talk about racism. I've decided to entitle tonight's show, Understanding Racism, What You Can Learn and What You Can Do. It's time to take things that we learn into action. And I'm learning every day, and I'm learning from people like I'm going to be bringing on. So first, I'm going to bring on my very good friend and esteemed colleague, Dr. Carol Penn. Hi, Carol.
Hello. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show this evening, Dr. Kathy.
You're welcome, Carol. And Carol and I have been colleagues for a long time at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. And we integrate a lot of what we've learned through the Mind-Body Medicine and other venues into the course that we'll be leading. We're actually doing a new course, and we'll get into that a little bit later. A couple other folks that I want to invite on to our stage. Oh, I forgot to actually really introduce you, Dr. Carol. I apologize. So Dr. Carol, she was having a little technical difficulties with her mic and such, so we were a little working on that. So Dr. Carol is a doubly board certified family physician and obesity medicine. She has a long-standing history of really a varied and illustrious career in dance, choreography, still is a choreographer, is still a dancer, and she's a best-selling author, Meditation, the Time of Madness, a wonderful book for talented tweens and teens and their parents and people who love them. And there's more, believe me, but you can find it on her website, which we'll get to you a little bit later. So Dr. Carroll, I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here. Excited to talk about what's to come.
What's to come for sure. So next I'm going to invite on two wonderful occupational therapists. The first is Heather Schmidt. Hi, Heather.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. So Heather is an occupational therapist in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, and she is the founder of Integrative Therapy and also Integrative Education. The Integrative Education sponsored the symposium that Dr. Carroll and I spoke at last weekend, and that particular course was on disrupting racial trauma. What you bring to the table matters. And we'll get a little bit into that. We want to review that a bit because we're taking the best of that and putting it into our course. So welcome, Heather. We're going to be hearing from you in a minute. Next, we have Dawn. So Dawn Paulson is another occupational therapist. And I know I've fallen in love with occupational therapy in my many years of volunteering at Camp Avanti. And I know Dr. Carroll has been really impressed with meeting that community as well. So Dawn also works at Integrative Therapies, and she works, as Heather does, with children in pediatric occupational therapy. So I am going to just hide that so you can see that. There you go. Okay, so let's all just take a breath. We do that a lot in our course, and I know I felt like I was kind of talking a mile a minute, so let's just take a couple of breaths together and actually invite all of you that might be watching, and hopefully there's a few of you. Yes, all that, just to join us in a breath. So just notice your breathing, feel your feet on the floor if you're sitting or standing. If you want to let your eyes drift closed, that's absolutely fine. And sometimes when I do that, I naturally sigh a bit, which really is nature's way of letting us let off a little steam. I invite you to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Maybe breathing out anything that's been stressing you today. Maybe breathing in some relaxation. Letting your breath sink into your belly. And as you do so, you may feel your shoulders relax a bit. Maybe your jaw even relaxes. Maybe your forehead relaxes. And another breath in and out. You can open your eyes if you have them closed. So, thank you, folks, for joining me in the breath. And as in the course we just did, in the course we do, we integrate a lot of mind-body skills into what we do. For me, I was feeling a little bit rushed, and I knew that I needed to do a little bit of breath so I could access my prefrontal cortex and speak a little more clearly, hopefully. So, what I want to talk about today is I wanted to start with you, Heather. I wanted to start with why you decided to carry our course, a 2-day course on unpacking racism, healing racism, in your course, an Integrative Symposium last weekend, which has traditionally been primarily for occupational therapists. And actually, if you could give a sentence or two about occupational therapy too, that would be wonderful. And then why you decided to take our course, to offer our course to your folks.
Absolutely. Well, first, I just want to say again, take a moment of gratitude for the two of you for being at the symposium. It was a well-received course and a really important course. So first, thank you so much for being present for that and for having me here tonight. As occupational therapists, we really look at people's occupations, their jobs. How do they, not just what do they do in their career, but what do they do on a daily basis that's meaningful and important to them? And what we look at is what is getting in the way of folks doing those jobs or occupations. So OTs can work in a variety of settings with a variety of age groups. So some people are really familiar with their grandma getting a hip replacement and visiting them in rehab, and grandma learning, or grandpa learning how to take care of themselves, getting in and out of the shower and cooking meals and recovering after a surgery. So sometimes it's disease or disability, disease or surgically related. Dawn and I work in schools, and so our job as OTs with children functioning in schools, what are children's jobs? It's to learn in school, it's to play. It also is to take care of themselves, but that looks very different in the school setting. They do need to use the restroom, but they also need to get their lunch. They need to get their clothes on and off before recess. So we really look at what is disrupting their daily function, and then how can we be supportive, whether it's changing the task, changing the environment, or teaching skills. So that's kind of OT in a nutshell, and can look and feel very different depending on what's getting in the way of the person being successful. So Dr. Carol and Dr. Kathy spoke at our Integrative Education Symposium. So I have Integrative Education, which is a company that provides continuing education opportunities to pediatric rehab folks like occupational therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists. We also do get some social workers, some mental health professionals, some educators that attend our conference as well. And for me, when I was looking at planning the conference in conjunction with Don Paulson and some of the other folks on our planning committee, one of the big pieces that we start with is what is important in our community right now? What are some trends and some things that we need to be thoughtful about? And some of that planning took place in May, which is the time where George Floyd was murdered, and there was a lot of unrest in our communities. As Dr. Kathy said, I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, so directly our community was very affected by that event, as many communities and many folks were affected. And so for me, it was, for me personally, I was affected and wanted to learn more and wanted to do more and do better. And so that, led me personally on a path of thinking about resources and learning myself, and came across Dr. Kathy and Dr. Carroll's course and work. I've known Dr. Kathy for many years, and was really interested in some of the work they were doing, and also myself participated in a version of this course that they're offering last summer. It was an Unpacking Racism course. So through that course, it really helped me to gain some see a different perspective from different different people, and dive into some of the history that isn't being taught in our schools right now, as far as the Great Migration North, and just a totally different historical perspective. Really, was helpful to me to just learn and understand the challenges that our communities, that people of color have been challenged with for way too long. And we do need to be disrupting this, and we do need to be thoughtful about the challenges that are still going on, that are still in our communities. And Dawn and I, our other job, I have integrative education, but our primary work actually is in schools. And we serve many communities where most of the school are children of color, and they're faced with racism on a daily basis. And so how do we show up for these children and and how do we show up for families and children? How do we show up as a white woman with my lived experience, and recognizing someone else's lived experience being very, very different than my own, and connecting and asking better questions, asking the right questions, and helping to connect human to human. So for me, the course was really impactful and insightful for me as a person, for me as a clinician, for me as a leader of a team. So to get back to your question, we brought you to the symposium because that work was really important, and I wanted that message to be heard, and I wanted other therapists to, have the opportunity to dive in a different way. I think the two of you bring that mind, body, spirit piece. This is hard work. They're hard conversations. And so being able to breathe, being able to have tools in your toolbox to process that, I think for me was a really helpful way to approach a really sensitive topic. Yes.
Thank you, Heather. That's really helpful. And again, thank you so much for inviting us and supporting us in it. I want to say hello to Victoria, who is also an occupational therapist, who's been in our courses as well, and Patrick. Anybody else want to say, you have any shout outs you need to or want to do at this time? Now we're going to come to you, Dawn. So Dawn, again, thank you for supporting Dr. Carol and myself. She was our tech person as we were like, okay, how do we get our PowerPoints up? And then practiced our breathing, or maybe a little shaking. So thank you again for being so supportive, both of you. And you were a participant in the 2-day course. So give the viewers, whether it's real time or later, just a little sense of what it was like for you. We heard from Heather and what it was like for you.
Yeah, so I think as a participant and getting to know the other participants, we all came to the course at different parts of our journey with learning about racism, in our journey of being allies, anti-racist activists. We all entered this conversation at a different part. And I think what was really impactful for me about the course was that no matter where anyone was on that journey, you provided a safe, non-judgmental space to be able to enter the conversation. As Heather said, we had a reckoning as a country last spring, and I think a lot of people sort of made this commitment to learning more and entering more deeply into this work. And that means, reading and learning. And I know I have a stack of books that high, which has been wonderful. And it's not enough. The work happens in having conversations and dialogue with other people. It's not learning in isolation, but it's learning and then bringing it out into the world and showing up and engaging in conversation. And what I appreciated about your course was exactly that. It was an opportunity to do both, to learn more, to examine our own racial implicit biases, but then also to show up and start these conversations in a really safe, non-judgmental environment. What I appreciated was the fact that knowing that, with these conversations, there's sometimes uncomfortable feelings. There's nervous systems that can start to, as you were talking about earlier, even just kind of rising, that sympathetic nervous system turns on. And so what I really appreciated was exactly how you started the session tonight. You bring that awareness of the fact that these can be kind of tough conversations, or bring up kind of tough insights or awarenesses. And alongside that, you offered tools to help our nervous systems regulate. We as OTs love that word. And what that means is to sort of put a blanket on our amygdala, as you taught us in the course, and to kind of calm that amygdala down so that we can access our prefrontal cortex. We can, in a balanced way, feel regulated to continue our engagement. So I loved, and it was the strategies that you offered were a variety of strategies. You offered breathing, you offered guided meditation, you offered journaling, you offered drawing, you offered just sitting meditation, you offered loving kindness meditation. And those were interspersed very intentionally throughout the course, which really added to, I think at the end of the course, I said, I feel like I've been on a retreat. It was a 2-day course, which felt like and what I meant by that was I did really deep and important work. And at the same time, I didn't feel depleted at all. I felt renewed and refreshed and energized and ready to take the insights that I had gained during those 2 days out into the world then. And so, I'm a fan. I am a fan of your course. I will talk up and down about how wonderful it is, and really how accessible it is to everybody. Yes, we are all medical professionals, but you don't need to be a medical professional to really find value in this course. So thank you for putting it together. Thank you for offering it and bringing it in such an intentional way out into the world.
I think we lost Kathy there. So
I wasn't sure if it was me.
Hopefully she'll come back on, because I think we are still live.
Okay.
So thank you, Dawn, so much for sharing everything that you shared, and Heather as well. It is important to, I believe, integrate that neurobiology and that neurophysiology so that you don't go away with your shoulders up under your ears, and then you feel like, I don't want to do this work. It's too hard. It's too difficult. Welcome back, Kathy. We were just
carrying on.
Yes, we just carried on. There are people with us, so we want to continue the discussion. So I was just reflecting and commenting why we feel it's so important to include the neurobiology, the neurophysiology, and what I like to say is the neurospirituality, allowing us to metabolize feelings of tension, anxiety, even stopping and asking, notice what's occurring for you right now. And if it is uncomfortable, let's see if we can metabolize it, not to bypass it at all, but certainly to recognize deeper, darker, more challenging emotions, and to metabolize it in a way that allows us to stay on course with the discussion, that allows us to continue with the deeper dive and still feel supported enough to do that so that the work can go on. I think people hit a wall with it and they stop, they withdraw, and it's just too painful. So, and I think there's too much at stake for us to pull back and pull away from the work. We need to keep going forward at this time in our history.
Yes, indeed. And Dr. Carroll, thank you very much. That was a new one, just being kicked off my panel. I also wanted to ask you, Dr. Carroll, to expand a little bit, both with the course that we just did with the occupational therapist primarily for integrative ed, but also the course that we're doing for the Association for the Advancement of Restorative Medicine. We are also focusing on health professionals. And why do you think it's so important for health professionals? Tell us a little bit about what we're hearing and as we really delve into it, about healthcare disparities as it relates to racism.
Well, that's something that the pandemic has really uncovered, right? It's brought it to light. It's not that we haven't known this, but boy, does this underscore it. So you can go into an area where African Americans or minorities are 12% of the population, yet their COVID infectivity rates are 3 times that. How is that possible? Look at the Americans. Mortality rates have been twice as high for Latino, Latinx. It's been 1.5 times as high. Again, yet minority population, but with the majority of the problems. So why is it? How is it? And if we take a deeper dive, we can look into the larger concept of structural racism, where everywhere interwoven into our society, into our laws, are ways that separate us, that keeps things in a certain tucked in way for white America, and then there's everybody else, and everybody else gets this other. And a lot of the other has been targeted at the African American community. So that's one place to look. This is why we also bring in the historical perspective. And to answer your question about looking at medicine, medicine is at the heart of the matter. We take an oath that says, first do no harm, yet it's complex because medicine is also a part of the establishment. And every way you look, if you look in policing, you look in medicine, you look in economics and in housing, there have been laws enacted, regulations written that have kept African Americans from being able to be homeowners, being able to vote, being able to have educational opportunities. You keep adding this up, and medicine's a part of that system. Medicine is a part of that system. There was a whole science that was devoted to proving the genetic inferiority of dark-skinned people, of African American people, the whole eugenics movement, all of it. And it plays right into it. So we have to look at these things. We have to own these things. We have to begin to dismantle these things at the systemic level. And hopefully information will help people expand their peripheral vision, if not, in fact, change their minds and touch their hearts. my hope that if the mind can't be exactly changed or the heart can't be touched, that at least the information will make those who are receptive to receiving information and learning able to take a step towards allyship. And after they take that step towards allyship, perhaps they might look at becoming an accomplice and saying, you know, we really need to make this better for everybody. It's not just this one group that we're making it better for, but it really is looking at systems, putting systems in place that make it better for the majority of people.
And certainly part of that putting systems in place is truth telling. You know,
Yes.
it's gathering the data and truth telling. And I know in your show yesterday morning that Dawn and I were on, you know, you referenced the New England Journal Medicine article about racism and the effect of healthcare. And in fact, in healthcare, and you know, looking at the very things that you're talking about, the difference in housing and the difference in policing and the prison, the school to prison pipeline, and all of those things. And you know, we talk about and look at. You know, I was having a conversation with another friend of mine who happens to be another African American physician who had mentioned, you know, I hate to hear those statistics about morbidity and mortality because it makes me feel like I'm inferior. And really, you know, when we or when I hear and talk to my friends and hear about, you know, the extra added pressure. You, Dr. Carroll, or other folks are under every single day, you know, worrying about the safety of, you know, your Black son. And, you know, knowing that him being driving in a car at night in a certain neighborhood could mean something different than it might for many of us. I mean, we all worry about our kids, let's be real. But there's that difference. There's that difference that I think is clearly, in my mind, a part of what happens. And if you have to deal with that day in and day out, how could a person not have high blood pressure, not have stress-related illness? So even just, you know, from the get-go, there's that disparity, just to live your life.
No, absolutely. And that is, it's that part. If we could touch people's hearts, maybe they would be able to look at it from just the human perspective of what it's like to live with that amount of scrutiny, pressure, and uncertainty. And to be aware of, wow, you know, I no matter what I do, I don't have access to a level playing field.
Yeah. And certainly I think that it's certainly in the communities that I've worked in, you know, many different communities, whether it's you know, folks after disasters, et cetera. Sometimes, you know, sometimes the adults are very, you know, like, I'm tough, I can do this. And people will rally around their children. They were rallying around, how do we help our children? And Heather, you know, we were chatting a little bit before we actually went on live about, you know, what's happening in Minneapolis. You know, this is jury selection week for the police officers that are being, the police, Derek Chauvin, the person that, in my opinion, murdered George Floyd. And so say a little bit, Heather, and I'll ask you to as well, Dawn, about kind of what's going on in the community and even the schools.
Yeah, I was sharing with this group right before we got on that that last week I was part of a call with a school that we're new to be serving, and their school in North Minneapolis. Majority of their students are African American and or Latino, and the leadership team was talking about and thinking about, how do we support our community and our students going into this week with the trial happening. And you know, what does that look like? What do we do? What conversations do we have? And how do we support them? And I think that, you know, is a huge piece for our community in Minneapolis, but in the country, is that this trial will bring up a lot of those uncomfortable feelings and those, this call to action. This is not okay. It is not okay for all of these disparities to be there. It is not okay for, the people in our community who have a different skin color than us, for them to be living with that heightened awareness that we were just talking about. It is not okay. We need to keep disrupting the system. We need to keep putting these different systems in place. We need to keep, moving forward, because we are all human. And I think this week especially, there are going to be more conversations, and or that we need to be open or ask those questions, or ask our students, how are you feeling about this week? And even just that recognition that it's part of what their lived experience is. So I think even just that recognition.
Yes. Dawn, would you like to add? You work in the schools as well.
Yeah, one of the schools I work in is actually literally blocks from where George Floyd was murdered. The riots happened in this community, in the streets where the children and their families were living. Some of them had to relocate because of what was happening in terms of protesting and just, for their own safety. And so it is felt, in that particular school, just viscerally, in their day-to-day lives, there is a constant reminder, even before the jury selection started, there is a constant reminder when they walk out in the streets and see that buildings are still boarded up, and they see that some buildings that were burned down are just not there, and they walk past the site where George Floyd was murdered, in their neighborhood, and it's real and it's alive. And so I think, for those students in particular, but also, as Heather said, for students across our nation, they have had this brought to their awareness in a really big, overt way, and in a way where families are talking about this, and there is a lot of emotion around it. And as we all know, children soak up that emotion. So there has been a lot of intent in the schools, and I work in that one school in particular, but around what can we do to support these children and families? Is it even fair to have education? Of course, kids need to go to school, but really, how can we support their social emotional well-being? How can we support families' social emotional well-being as really the big part of what they're dealing with every day is related to? And again, this school is a school that is mostly Latinx families, and so they have felt it. They've lived it. They've felt it firsthand. This being treated differently because of the color of their skin, and now, with it being talked about and with emotions heightened, how can we support them? And always, but especially now, going into the jury selection. I just received today an email from the Minnesota Department of Education that has, kind of brings that to attention, and has ways, suggested ways of supporting teachers, of supporting students, of supporting families, as we're dealing with these heightened emotions, moving into jury selection, and then the trial, and then whatever the result of the trial is going to be. There's a lot of lot of anxiety, and still, just a lot of not just anxiety, but outrage, and rightly so. Um, and and so, with intentionality, pulling down these resources, implementing them through our work, is something that we're very much paying attention to.
Yeah, and I think that as you both have said, the importance of not just being aware of it, but not being afraid of the conversation, not being afraid of asking the question, "What is it like for you?" I certainly know in my work at Minneapolis Children's Hospital Clinic, which is also close to that site, I have seen so much more anxiety, so much more insomnia, certainly around May, June, but also since then. And I think just to ask those questions, whether any families, particularly the families of color, and how are you talking to your children, and how can you bring them into the conversations, because they know it. I mean, because sometimes people, we don't have the TV on or whatever, but like you said, kids pick it up. I do want to bring on Victoria's comment, and then Dr. Carroll, I want to hear what you have to say. So Victoria had said, if we truly embrace treating each other the way we would want to be treated in public or behind closed doors, I believe a lot of these issues would be significantly reduced. Indeed. Indeed. And it's clear that the advent of videos and now recording what has happened and making it public is making a difference. Dr. Carroll, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, again, I think that a healthy dose of self-examination is called for. It would be a great idea if people could, stop, kind of, uh, uh, you know, take a breath and think about, reflect on when you started to learn lessons around skin color, that your skin color may have an impact on how you see the world and how the world sees you. Think about it when it crept up. Who did you get those messages for? And those insights might then serve as breadcrumbs to let you know how things came to be the way they are in your world. If you live in a neighborhood that has only one kind of person in it, one ethnicity or one race, how did that happen? Was that something by choice, the people's choice, or was that something by design, or is that something imposed by certain policies that you might not be aware of, but that are impacting your life every single day? Think about where in the prison pipeline, think about where are a lot of our private prisons, and when did these prisons start to grow up? Well, a lot of our private prisons are in rural areas after those areas' economies started to shut down because of industrialization and what have you. And the people who got the jobs at the prisons were mostly people with a white skin. They had lost their job on the farm, but now we have a prison in place where they might have been working on the farm. So now they're working in the prison system. Well, you had to have people to put behind bars. So again, those that have been separated out as other, even though they might be the minority population, they make up the majorities in the prison. So it continues to be a part of this, economic driver that has created this structural racism. And that's what I want people to look at. That's the history that I want people to see and hear. Those are the policies that I want people to understand. And again, I think for a portion of people that use reason, this will be enough to make them shift. It's not going to make everybody shift, but it's going to help a certain type of person shift. And so for me, I'm just really going for, one open mind at a time. One open mind at a time.
Yes, thank you. Heather, you want to add?
Oh yeah, I was just going to piggyback to say that. I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but I do think that in your course and how you go through the history and the systems and how those things, how that history has unfolded and its impact on our lives even today and how things are set up, that was really eye-opening for me to gain that knowledge and information from that course, because it's not the same information that we were taught in school. It's not the same history. And I know people are working to make changes in what is taught, in our schools moving forward. But for me, that was especially helpful to hear that side of things for me personally, to have that kind of shift and, like I had no, I just didn't, you don't know what you don't know, right? Until, and then when you know, you do better. So anyways, as you were talking, Dr. Carroll, it made me think of that.
Yeah, I would agree with Heather in that, just that expanding from, I think in being an ally and in being an anti-racist, there's a lot of initial focus on what can I do in my day-to-day life, and then expanding beyond that and asking those very questions of, wait, like how did this come to be, or on a systemic level, how did this happen, or what is the history behind this? Like Heather said, that's not necessarily being taught in every school, and so starting to ask more questions and ask better questions. And I think yesterday when we were speaking, one of the quotes I love from your course, I think it was Dr. Carroll that said it, was what we reveal can be healed. And I think that, pulling back the curtain, like in The Wizard of Oz, pulling back the curtain and seeing how this was actually built to begin with, is, we're revealing a lot now, that was always there. But I think the conversations and the news articles that are coming out are revealing all of this in a new way, and people are in a place, I think, more to have eyes to see and ears to hear this, which we can do a lot of individual work, on an individual level, but in order to really shift it, we need to start to address these issues of structural racism. And that, again, kind of coming full circle to where I started with my with my reflections on your course, in order to shift that structural racism, we have to become activists. And in order to become activists, we have to feel comfortable engaging in conversation. We have to feel comfortable entering into the picture in that way. And I think your course really offers that opportunity to develop the skills needed to move that to the next level.
Yeah, and I know I heard things like from other course participants, without saying their names, but like I work in a school with people of color, and I realize I've been standoffish, so I'm going to find out what their experience is like, or I may actually talk at the school about what occupational therapy is, and maybe some child that never thought about occupational therapy as a profession might actually see it in a different way. Dr. Carroll, anything you'd like to add at this point?
Yeah, well, I do. I love the idea of encouraging occupational therapists to go into the schools, or to start, those of you that are working in the schools, invite the kids, ask, have you thought about what you want to be when you grow up? And, kids give their answers, but I bet you don't hear too many kids saying they want to grow up to be an occupational therapist, because again, it's not something that we're even introduced to as an idea. And I think it's such a lovely profession. There's so many aspects to it. It is mind, body, and spirit. It is something where you can get in there. You can literally put your hands into it, your hands and your heart. And I think if more boys and girls knew about this, just like they, hear about being a teacher, a police officer, and a fireman or woman, they need to hear about occupational therapy. A lot of kids, oh yeah, they hear about being a doctor, and then everybody thinks, oh, the doctor is the healthcare profession that you want. Not necessarily. If they knew what the other options were, it could be a much more suitable dream, a much more suitable goal, and ultimately a much more suitable lifetime and career than, everybody thinks, oh, I, should grow up and if I'm going to go into healthcare, I should be a doctor. Or then if they don't know about being a doctor, the other one they know about is being a nurse. Well, there's a whole lot in between. And then there's this beautiful field called occupational therapy.
Indeed. Yes. I agree wholeheartedly. In fact, it was fun because I've sung the praises of occupational therapies, and my niece became an occupational therapist, and she attended the course. So that was really kind of fun having her at our course as well. And I think that, really, really, the other thing about our courses is that they're real time. So just like in this panel, we know what's going on is the kind of back and forth with the, are they going to be doing jury selection? Are they doing, that's all going to drag on. And also, so we bring real life. And unfortunately, there's no dearth of current events in which to discuss racism. I'm going to bring on Maria Shea. Hey, Maria. So she's got some comments for us. Great to see you all in this conversation. A comment on pulling the curtain back on racism. I was so glad to see that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry pulled back the curtain with the Oprah interview yesterday on the racism of the royal family and institution, that they were concerned what the color of the skin of their baby Archie would be, and therefore not getting the title of prince, and security protection removed because of the color of his skin. I have not seen that. Thank you, Maria. Maria is a wonderful counselor and coach. Thank you. So
I didn't see the interview, but I just read about the interview, and I was surprised about the comments in the article, related to the racism that she has experienced and talked about. So I'm kind of curious to actually watch the interview now, but just reading about it, I was surprised. And it, again, there isn't there's plenty of things to talk about in the current, world all the time. I think when I was taking the Unpacking Racism course, I think that's when the incident in Kenosha had happened, and we talked about it. I think it was the day after maybe that the course happened, and so I also think that helped folks process that and have a conversation about it and hear different people's perspectives of their reaction to that current event as well. So.
Yeah, I did see the interview, and it was, yes, those points were brought up, and I have to say I wasn't in the least bit surprised. Not at all. As soon as I found out that she was pregnant, ask anybody that I happened to have a discussion with her, I said, they're all wondering what color that child's going to be, because that gene pool could reach and go a lot of different ways. And the color of that child's skin they all know will make a difference in how that child is viewed in the world. And that goes both ways. That was a concern from my grandmother about what my skin tone was going to be. It was something, African Americans have known a long time, and it started back in slavery when the masters were sleeping with these enslaved women that, essentially raping them and then producing these babies, and the babies who had lighter toned skin were treated better. They were the ones that got a little bit more food, or when they got older, they might have been, taught a trade where they could work inside the house versus in the fields. They were the women that were sort of caramel colored. They were often ended up being back in the master's bed because they thought they were found to be more attractive. So the rape was perpetuated and continued that way. But the fairer the skin, the different textures of the hair, the different shaping of the features could be also a survival advantage, could also be an economic advantage. So that question of what color is that baby going to be is a question that's been asked on both sides.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Yeah. And it's that kind of conversation about your lived experience versus our lived experience that I think that makes the course so rich. And I'm always learning for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So we're coming to a close here. All right, let's carry on, Marie. Thanks for bringing it to the table. So maddening that even in Meghan and Harry's courage, they're still not naming the who in the family and institution, macro and micro. In the world, we're still protecting the white supremacy, white fragility. Assuming Prince Charles is a key player speaks to the mental health. So yeah, still protecting. Yeah. Of a son losing his relationship with his own father if he names the racism. Okay, so assuming Prince Charles is a key player speaks to the mental health of a son losing his relationship with his own father if he names the racism. That's the second part of it. Yeah. Indeed. So, yeah, how does that land with people? I know with me, I have to process it a little bit. I have to metabolize it a little bit. And yeah. So it's more truth telling. It's more shining a light on the truth. It's more, what is revealed perhaps can be healed. We're hoping it can be healed. Well, we certainly can't heal it if it's not revealed, for sure. So, and I know for me, it continues to be, at times, when I hear about the disparities or the differences that, that you describe, Carol, I feel that, and I feel that in my body, and I can't shy away from it. If I do feel shame or whatever, I have to own what's mine and what's not. But I also know that I can't let shame or embarrassment or disbelief lull me into silence. And for me, using just a venue like this is what I need to do, at least one of the things that I need to do. And I think also, as you said, asking the questions. So I think, perhaps shifting it back again to our course, which is Unpacking Racism in the Health Professionals. I know for myself, I need to be asking the questions of, why is this happening in our hospitals or our institutions? Why is there different treatment of people of color in COVID, for example? It's not that they're weaker. Okay, why is that? And these are questions that we're not going to be able to answer tonight, but we need to continue to ask those questions. Carol, did you want to add? You're muted still.
Well, what I would add is I'd love for people to go to restorativemedicine.org and find out about the course. Register for the course. I know it's, 2 for 1 at this point, where if you register, you can then invite a friend and register them right then and there. As you register, it's 6 weeks. And it really is an opportunity to take that dive, not only for yourself, but take that dive kind of for the bigger picture. I don't want us to go back to normal. I'm not interested in anything that happened back there. I am interested in finding collaborators and people who can co-process that are willing to create a better normal.
Beautiful. So the name of the course is Unpacking Racism for the Healthcare Professionals. And I think it's time for us to band together. Please help us spread the word. You can screenshot this on the restorativemedicine.org. And I also put it in the comments. I don't know if it's coming across everyone's Facebook feed, but it's coming across a couple of them. And I'll post it after we get off as well. As Dr. Carroll mentioned, it's 2 for 1. Instead of having a 2-day commitment, it's a 90-minute commitment once a week, beginning in April 12th to May 17th on Monday evenings, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's an investment. It's an investment in your knowledge. It's an investment in your community. It's an investment in the health of everyone. A rising tide floats all boats. We talked quite a bit about the book, The Sum of the Parts, in which, if we all do better, we all do better. It's not really just a one race problem. It's all of our problems. So I appreciate Heather, Dawn, Dr. Carroll being on this. Please share this, folks. Reach out to us if you have questions about the course. Check out the website. It's a great organization, Restorative Medicine. And let's just end the way that we started. Let's just end with some breathing. So just settle into your breath in this moment. Maybe for a moment, just reflecting, letting what's been said in this last hour just sort of drift over, and then settle into your breath. Knowing that breath does not have color, or gender, or race, or age. And then perhaps just hand on your heart if you wish. Knowing that we can know better and do better. So thank you all for joining us, and continue to follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and watch for more of our series, my series, kathyfarrow.com and wisermedicine.com. Thank you. And folks, you can stay on when I end.